this is the lore dump episode. Unless you're just like a total nerd that's into world building, you don't have to listen to this to enjoy the rest of the show. I'm gonna go over like a lot of stuff. Like, I'm not gonna do any spoilers in here. It's just gonna be stuff that the players already know and stuff that the audience would know if we had started recording at like game 1 instead of like they're at level 4 right now. But this is just stuff that they know that I'm probably not going to reference in the show because I don't want to waste time saying stuff that the players already know about. So if you don't want to feel lost, which you probably wouldn't anyway, or not that bad at least, I'm going to just literally give you a history lesson about a place that doesn't exist. So here we go. First things first, they just call this the material plane. The material plane, most of the culture here is dictated by just how small it is. I think I did the math. It was like 28 times 25. Let me do it again so I can actually give... Because if you're going to listen to this whole thing, you are going to want to know the numbers if you're that kind of person. Yeah, so the material plane is only about 750 miles in diameter. That's extremely, extremely, extremely small. Every, what I call a continent, is like a little smaller than the state of Texas, but that's pretty much why everything happens so fast, and why if there's some kind of evil in the world, somebody's supposed to go take care of it, and if there's like a mass murderer going around, there's only, not including the Underdark, there are only 24,741,000 people on the whole Earth. So if somebody's like a serial killer, that's like a big issue because there are already so few people in the first place. So in addition to being small, the material plane is flat. You can stand on a mountain on a clear day and basically see forever. There's some islands on the edge of the world near Bahuya, and I'm going to figure out how to get pictures of the map up somewhere. But you can literally stand on these islands and look down into the endless blackness of space and watch the water fall off the ocean until it just goes into space dust. There are also legends of creatures in the Underdark who have dug so far down that they fell out of the bottom of like the disk that makes the world. The thickest part of the material plane kind of disk is 20 miles, and the thinnest part is only 3 miles. It's like under the ocean in one place. And, you know, don't worry about the water flowing off the Earth, because millions of gallons come out of what I call the beam. The beam is a beam of light that connects the material plane to the rest of the planes. It's a little north of the equator. It like connects every plane like a shish kebab made of, dimensions and everything. But you can get to the other planes without using plane shift by jumping into the beam and thinking really hard about where you want to go. But your success is not guaranteed. You might get splinched or something if you fail your wisdom save. Millions of gallons of water come out of the beam every single day from the plane of water. And then the atmosphere floats away, but that's what the plane of air is for. And sometimes little pieces of the earth fall off, but then slowly more comes out of the beam, kind of like plate tectonics or whatever. There are little islands around the beam that have some of them have taken on their elemental extremes based on what plane most affects them. Some that have been pushed too far away to be any kind of one polarized plane. They're a paradise one day and then a lava-filled hellscape the next. But so much air and moisture is pushed out of the beam that it affects the weather and the ocean and magic in a 130-mile radius around it. There is a desert circle in a 25-mile wide area at the edge of the beam's influence, where there's no wind and the water in the ocean is still. When traveling toward the beam, you're going against the wind and against the current, so you go slower and even more slower as you get closer, and then a ship traveling further away from the beam would go faster as it was closer to the beam and slowly slow down until it got back to the desert circle, where you'd have to row your boat with like an oar or something, because it's literally, you'll just sit there forever. Right, magic is also kind of screwy next to the beam. Sometimes spells don't work, and sometimes they're more powerful. The weather and ocean outside of the area of influence of the beam is like specific to that area's kind of like topography and stuff. To the north and south of the world, though it's a circle, the Pelor literally makes the sun rise every day, and then he turns it off at night. So in the middle of the equator is all warm, but then they call it a cold line, and they don't know what causes it, because like even if Pelor's sun was just really weak, it doesn't explain why it's so cold. It might get so cold so fast. These cold lines have been creeping downward since like forever at a rate about 2 inches per year. Below the cold line's normal weather, and then it transitions to about -20 Fahrenheit within like a mile. So you could go from 80 to -20, you know, without like even in probably 30 minutes of walking. There are storms that come from beyond the cold line once every few years, and they freeze like everything in their path. These storms are called the Yog. Some storms can push or pull the cold line like forward or back, and again, no one knows what causes the cold line, but sometimes mountains are able to slow it down. It moves so slowly that like people on the equator are like, whatever, but people in the north and south only kind of care when the Yog comes. And so there was actually in recent history, if anyone's interested, I'll publish like my whole timeline. I'll probably put out all of this somewhere, somehow. And, but in recent years, the cold line descended like 10 miles from one of these storms, and like it's really close to, what town is it? Stone Mill. And everyone in Stone Mill's kind of freaking out, because if it goes any more, their entire town's gonna be frozen. Right, and because the world is flat, there are no seasons. People can grow crops all year round, so they don't save that much food, like how like we would for winter. Because like if a Yog comes, or if there's a blight or something, they'll just have food again as soon as they replant stuff. But sometimes like the Yog will come twice in a row, or like there'll be like a hurricane, and like everyone's just going to be screwed because only 30% of the world is able to support agriculture in the first place. And then, again, Pelor is the biggest religion because he literally makes a new sun and moves it over the earth every day. And, like, sometimes he doesn't make the sun go over the equator, like, exactly. It might be, you know, he just messes up the math and it goes a little sideways, but that's not usually a big deal. And sometimes it's bigger or smaller. And every now and then he's, like, tired, and so the sun goes down, like, early. And there was even one time where his, like, followers, like, pissed him off, and he didn't make the sun rise at all that day. But they didn't make that mistake again, because, eternal darkness is scary. All gods have a champion. This is their favorite and generally most powerful mortal in their zone of influence, though not always like the head of their religion, like the Pope or something. They have the most direct connection to the god, and while most religious folks rarely speak to their gods like directly or in dreams, a champion might, like, you know, get a dream or vision from their god every single day. There have also only been 9 wars ever. The world's about 6,000 years old, and so there only ever been 9 wars. That's crazy, but it's mostly because the world is so small in the first place. And people fight over land and power and resources and pride, like, all the time, but the difference in, like, what my NPCs would classify as war is, like, that it has to be a series of battles over a longer length of time, and it has to be formally, like, declared and accepted by the other party. It's like the difference between, like, just shooting someone and, like, having a duel. I don't know if that's how real wars work. I could Google it, but I'm not gonna. Also, going off more the nitty-gritty of culture, homosexuality and even, like, polyamory or polygamy, like, isn't really an issue unless you're someone who has, like, you're expected to have children in order to, like, pass on an inheritance. Other than that, no one cares. And, like, while not culturally shunned anywhere on the material plane, being genderqueer is still rare, only making up, like, 1% of the population or less. And, like, some non-binary people have, like, no genitals and some have, like, a mixture or whatever. But the way they kind of see it is, like, there are dragons here. We have bigger problems. Like, I don't care. And, like, depending on where you are in the world, race might mean something to you, like elves versus dwarves, for example, but generally sub-races and ethnicities within a race aren't really an issue. Again, there are dragons everywhere. Why do I care if he's tan? We have bigger problems. Also, humans are the, like, universal remote as far as having kids goes. Like, every sentient race of people, and even some monsters, can mate with a human and make a half-human, half-whatever, except for, dwarves, halflings, and gnomes can't mix with anything. And then, like, you know, even if, like, mixing other races, like, if you mix, you know, a dwarf and an elf together, or like an orc and a giant together, like, no matter how watered down they get with human DNA, it won't end well. Like, you know, miscarriages and birth defects and stuff. You know, these people still have relationships, but they just don't, they're discouraged from having children, just because it biologically won't work out. Going on a theme, some places are more patriarchal, and some are more matriarchal, but generally no one cares what a person's gender is unless they're, like, you know, considering getting with that person. People have jobs and familiar roles based on ability, not gender. A muscular man might be a metal worker, a thin man might be a tailor or something. A woman might take a man's name when they marry, but, like, stay-at-home dads are, like, just as common as stay-at-home moms. I have a quote that I put in here for my own fun. It's like, "The dragon is coming! Any able-bodied people take arms! Meet me at the gate! You, let's go!" It's like, "But sir, she's a woman." It's like, "Can you wield a hammer, ma'am?" "I can." "Well, find some armor her boobs will fit into and let's go! We have bigger problems!" Yeah. There are only a few cities or countries that have, like, a legally defined age of consent, because several of the sentient races of people are, like, mentally mature at different ages, and they live, like, vastly different lifespans. Like, you know, elves and drow are mature at, like, 90, and everyone else is mature, like, 14 to 30. And generally, it's acceptable for a couple to, like, get together or get married at, like, 15 at the earliest, as long as both parties are similar in age and maturity. If one member of the union is, like, mentally 15, and the other one's, like, mentally 30, that's, like, not... It's not illegal, but it's not accepted culturally. Arranged marriages are also common among both, like, high and low society, but, like, if one of the members, like, absolutely refuses to participate, they can't be legally forced into that marriage no matter what the guardians of that person have agreed upon. And divorce is also common, but not, like, stigmatized. And a fun thing I have is called, or I guess it's kind of fun, it's disappearing disease. Originally crafted as a convenient role-playing explanation for when a player was missing from a session, disappearing disease mainly affects people who travel often, like adventurers. When you disappear, you take anything worn or carried with you, excluding mounts or pets. So if you disappear, your horse stays. This plague affects many people around the world, and could also be exploited to explain why an NPC is not where they're supposed to be at a certain time. No one knows how this disease is transmitted, or where people go when they disappear. The missing people have no memory of where they've been when they come back. When a person leaves because of the disappearing disease, they'll reappear with whomever their closest companions are, no matter where they are or even what plane of existence they've traveled to in the interim. Because of this, even the most reclusive of people will anchor themselves to at least one other person in the world to make sure they come back where they're supposed to be. There have been tales of people who have, like, never come back at all, or maybe they came back in the wrong place because they never had, like, a strong connection to anyone. There's also, like, a very strong sense of community across the whole world, because, like, the disease requires people to look out for each other. I mean, like, imagine a single parent, like, getting the disappearing disease and leaving their kids alone. To have somebody come, like, check up on you if they haven't heard from you in a while is, like, not uncommon. When a person is taken or reappears, there's not even, like, a puff of smoke, they're just bam, there. And so, like, friendships are made quickly, even, like, among the most surly of adventurers, because nobody wants to disappear. I don't have a cool transition for this one, but when people say, you know, like, "Jesus Christ!" like, as an exclamation, traditionally, in RPGs, that prompts someone else to go, "Oh, who's that? A new god?" But, like, in my world, it's a reference to a champion of a mater from long ago who's become, like, a Paul Bunyan, Johnny Appleseed kind of guy, The long and short of the legend is that he could, like, supposedly feel when someone invoked his name in, like, a moment of, like, you know, frustration or pain or fear, and would, like, come to their aid if he could. So everyone's kind of just got that, like, back in the back of their mind, like it's a Shakespeare play or something. And it's just kind of become part of the colloquial language. Also, couriers here are, like, as relentless as the ones in Skyrim. Several of Eli Locke's investigators, like, used to be couriers, and, like, both bounty hunters and couriers, like, often interchange occupations when, like, work in one field is slower than the other. Also, the level of non-magical technology is, like, similar to that in the American 1850s, but this is, of course, you know, altered by the use of magic. So, like, instead of making the light bulb, they made mage lights, which are, like, little crystals that you can, like, glue to the wall, and they just glow forever. But also, like, I named him Donald Dennis, like, just invented the cotton gin, like, 5 years ago. So, like, magic might advance things, or it could hold them back, or hold them back according to our thing, like, they're... And then, of course, you know, role-playing is, like, you can never let the players invent nukes, because that's gonna ruin the game. Anyway. Relevant recent history... the current year is 1378 of the Third Era. There are several events in history where they have, like, just restarted counting, because it might as well have been a new world. Vecna was banished 13 years ago by a group of adventurers based in Thunderscram. Thunderscram is it's the very, very north. It's actually the only major city above the cold line. That's because, like, they live in, like, it's like a crater from a meteor. And so, like, it's close enough to, like, lava where it keeps it warm enough in there for them not to, like, die from the cold. And it's, like, they're very isolated, and they also are the biggest, like, anti-magic community in the world. So they're, like, you know, real-world technology, like guns and, like, thermal power, is much more advanced than the rest of the world that is using magic. They're, like, highly militarized, kind of like Spartan. Nothing is wasted on aesthetics. They do not care if it's pretty, only if it's well made. And it's populated mostly by half-giants, half-orcs, and humans. Thunderscram also just started, like, mass-producing guns, and, like, this is the first time that's been done, because guns are, like, comparatively a new invention. They've been around for a while, but never enough to, like... They're just starting to win people over, like, you know, cost versus usefulness, etc. Also, a big note in... recent history that's got a lot of people worried. There are many religious folks of all different religions who are having the same kind of dream or vision. They're trying to keep it on, like, the down low so people don't freak out because they have no idea what it is, but they call this dream the Maw. The Maw dream is, like, usually you'll be talking to, you know, it could even be, like, your warlock patron, or, like, you're getting a dream from Tyr or something, and it's hijacked by the Maw vision. It's when you have the dream, you can see the entirety of, like, space. Every star, every gas cloud, all spread out before you, like a billion diamonds in sand and everything. And then one of the stars very far away turns green. And then that star gets brighter and brighter and brighter until it explodes in a disk of white light. And every time this disk, it keeps spreading and touches the other stars, and they turn green and explode into a disk of white light. And eventually this kind of, like, exploding shockwave, like, collapses on itself and creates this, like, black kind of emptiness, like that Vanta Black paint. Like, it just goes... it sucks up everything. And this eventually spreads and spreads and spreads, eating every other star until it consumes you as you're watching the dream. And you wake up and, like, you're hungrier than you've ever been in your whole life. Like, you're just, like, you have to eat or you'll pass out. And so they call it the Maw because it's, like, the feeling of being eaten. I told my players that, and instantly they were like, oh, it's like cosmic horror vor. I'm like, no, God, just endless, well. Yeah. And the way that, Campaign 2 started, I'll get to Campaign 3 in a second, but, the way Campaign 2 started is that all the players met each other because there was a festival to announce that Golgari and Thunderscram were building a new road to shorten the route between their cities. I don't remember the numbers, but it cuts off like 100 miles in the trip because you have to go like around some mountains, and so like they made a highway going through them, and so it'll just be good for everyone on the route along the way. But there was a like terrorist attack on the festival, and so the players had to go investigate it. Or I'd say also relevant recent history is like there's widespread kind of like, at least in Macadia, there's like widespread civil unrest between the working class and like the magic using nobility, because every town in Macadia has its own government. Like they're all just kind of a loose federation of cities, and they just kind of agree not to mess with each other, and so the laws are different in every single town. And so, like, your city mayor, you know, your city, like, the one judge you have, if you, like, say you're a town with 2,000 people, we'll say Edgewater. That's a town that kind of comes up. They have, like, their one judge and the police force, and there's, like, you know, the mayor, the tax office, everything else. And so, if you get arrested in Edgewater, and you get, you know, sentenced by your town judge, there's no, like, appeal. There's no higher place to be taken. So if they convict you for something, you're going to jail. There's no arguing. There's no like going again. So there's a lot of corruption because basically, if the people who own the like place where everyone works, and they also own like the land that you live on, and they also, you know, control the prices of your food, and also they can send you to jail at any moment. It's very, very corrupt. And so people are very tired of that. Also, just because magic is like so hard to learn, it's both because even like the nobility that can't use magic are usually just very corrupt, because like there's no higher power to stop them. The magic using nobility is even worse, because, you know, what is a farmer gonna do? He has like a scythe and a club, and then this guy, who both also, you know, owns his land, pays his wages, controls the price of everything, could send him to jail at any moment, can also cast Meteor Swarm from a mile away and nuke his entire place. Like, if you have somebody in charge of you who's like a level 20 wizard, there is nothing you can do to stop them as a commoner. And so people are just really angry about that all over the continent. So on Campaign 2, I'm going to summarize what happened before we started recording. This Campaign 2 is the one that is recorded on Mondays, and it starts in Macadia, the continent of Macadia. The very first thing, the players were in Golgari. I told them to, you know, for whatever reason you have personally in your backstory, but you're somehow here, during the Highway Announcement Festival, which is the highway that Golgari and Thunderscream are building together. During the festival, and like after the like big speech, there's like a terrorist attack, and the gang, you know, neutralizes the terrorists, who are like dressed as Vecna cultists, which is weird because Vecna was banished like 13 years ago and has no power on a material plane anymore. So his followers are like very sparse. After like showing that they were so capable, they were asked by Detective Eli Locke to go to a place where he thought that the cultists might be hiding out. I'm going to read Eli Locke's kind of flavor text. Detective Eli Locke is a 28-year-old, lanky, dark-skinned, well-groomed human. He wears like 3-piece suits, a fedora, and an iridescent purple bow tie. Eli started his detective agency at 13, but now that he's he solved his first murder at like 12 and became professional at 13. He works all over, but his agency's office is in Golgari. He's not involved in any government. It has no jurisdiction, so he can't arrest somebody, but he can. He acquires evidence on behalf of the whatever city's police, or a private eye for somebody, and he'll send junior detectives to go on more low-profile jobs he doesn't have time for. But he's extremely, extremely famous, like Sherlock Holmes level of famous. So he sends them there. They go to this seaside cave and kill some like other bandits who are not wearing the cultist uniform, but they're, highwaymen all the same. And so the gang, like before they even get to the final kind of like chamber, the leader of this group surrenders. He says his name is Donald Denham, and I'll read his flavor text as well. Right, Donald Denham, he's like a 30-year-old human man, dark brown hair with streaks of red, a deep tan. He looks like a dweeb and is like very awkward in general, but he grew up like very wealthy and inherited the cotton business from his family. They had a few like, miserable sharecropper farms and a few plantations with indentured servants and stuff. Donald not only invented the cotton gin, but revolutionized cotton farming by both investing in technology to increase yield and by improving farmers' quality of life. That's what he's really famous for, is he had this small kind of business, and then through, like, making it so where people wanted to work for him, is he would give them, loans for equipment with, like, extremely tiny interest. He'd send their kids to... He made an agricultural college and paid for a bunch of people to go to it because he, in exchange, he had them, like, only sell to him. So very, very quickly, he had a monopoly on the entire textile industry. He built, like, a bunch of clinics. Like, before this, the people in the furthest south town that he kind of... Like, these towns still have their own government, but he runs, like, the entire economy, so they might as well be run by him. The people in Dawnsville, which is the furthest south, had to travel 65 miles to Stone Garden to, like, see a real doctor. So he built medical clinics there. He helped people, like, get money to buy, like, build better homes and schools, and he, like, hired teachers that the town governments could never afford. He gave out, like, extremely low-interest loans to buy better equipment and, like, work animals. He founded a Denham Agricultural College in Dawnsville and gave out a ton of scholarships for people to go to it. He paid farmers a fair price for their crops. Like, it was cents, for what the textile people were, like, reselling for 100 times more than that, but he gives people, like, an actual fair trade for their labor in exchange for them only selling to him. So he drove everyone else out of business, and he lost a ton of money doing this, and cotton is considerably more expensive now. But not only does he have a complete monopoly, he completely changed the lives of 26,000 people for the better, and is both known like widely as a ruthless capitalist and also a hero philanthropist. Donald is not named after jeans. Jeans are named after him. He's the wealthiest man in the world without any government power. Though, of course, you could argue for street towns that they renamed them after him. Like, they had different names for that. It's Dawnsville, Dawnstone, and then Dawntown. And by the way, anything with a stone in the name, Stone Garden, Stone Mill, Dawnstone, that means it's like a mostly dwarven town. There is even a place in my world called Stone, just 'cause. And, so... He's actually a pretty humble guy, even though he's got a couple of towns named after him. His original plan, or he's the kind of guy who he did all that philanthropy stuff to make money. Like, he's in it for himself, but he did it in a way that helps people. So he still, for selfish reasons, changed the lives of 26,000 people. And his original mission was just to change the highway from going through Phandalin to go through Stone Garden, because they would help his towns to have more, like, trade there. Like, as more people went through Stone Garden because of the highway, it would help out his little towns that are kind of on the side roads, but still they're close enough, and, like, it would cut, like, transportation costs for him and all that. So that's what he was really in it for. And he claimed that he hired the highwaymen bandits to go pretend to be cultists, and they didn't kill anyone at the festival. They just, like, burned down some fruit stands and stuff and caused a ruckus. But then the adventuring party, the players, killed them, so whoops. And, Donald Denham is just going to claim that things really got really out of hand. He didn't mean for anyone to die. He just meant to, show that he was very against the thing, but he couldn't do it himself because, political reasons. But, so the adventuring party lets him go and tells them about Phandalin, which is, it's like in my world, I know Phandalin exists in other worlds, but this is like adventurer Mecca. Like it's like Las Vegas. Like the actual permanent population is very small, but the visiting population, there's like 3 times that, people just visiting and then leaving again. It's every other shop in Phandalin is like a magic shop, and it's built to service adventurers and their needs. Like there's weapons, there's there's an exorbitant amount of blacksmiths per capita because they're always building armor for adventurers or whatever. And most notably, there's the Phandalin Job Board, which is run by a half-orc named Brian Gilbert. But the job board is like, it takes up like a whole 3 walls of a tavern in town, and Brian Gilbert like organizes it by like like how hard it's going to be and like how much it's like paid. That way you can it's for me to I put that in there to explain to the characters why they would get missions that they were actually able to do, because this guy Brian Gilbert puts it together, and he gets like a small commission or something. But so anybody can like put a job on the job board and adventurers go and do it. Like there's giant goats in the mountains, or a dragon wormling that needs taken care of. And also while they were in town, so I had what I call the Teamwork Festival, which I mostly stole from the Adventure Zone, which I'm kind of glad we didn't record that, because it would definitely be copyrighted. I'll probably reference it a few times, but I don't know if it's enough to actually count for plagiarism. I guess until they send me a cease and desist. But, so the Teamwork Festival is where they got introduced to a half-giant named Augith. Augith is rumored to be the most powerful magic user on the planet. I made him a character sheet, and he's level 56. So that should tell you, he's the only mortal with like 3 9th level spell slots. I'm gonna actually read the like speech he gave at the. I do what I call cutscenes, and like a big. Let me read all of his speech first. Yeah, so they kind of roll into town and hear about the Teamwork Festival, and it's put on by the Soon Ilmater hospitals. Like, so the Soon is the goddess of beauty, and then Ilmater's the god of like enduring suffering, and so Augith is from Thunderscrim. I actually have a. Let me start over. I wrote. When I first started getting into D&D, I didn't have anyone to play with, so I got really just like into it, watching literally, Critical Role from when I woke up in the morning to when I went to sleep again. And so I just like, wow, that's, I'll make a bunch of characters, and I'll just get, like, I was too nervous to go to like a game shop and go play, because I didn't know the rules yet. So well, I'll learn the rules by playing, and so I played by myself. And I wrote down what happened, and then I turned that into a novel. It's like 22 chapters. I might release it someday if this ever takes off, or I might release that separate, even if anyway. So Augith is from that book, and in that book there's a place called Thunderscrim, again, the crater city up north. And so there's something called the Dark Month, which is when these wizards blocked off Thunderscrim from the rest of the world by like a time dilation kind of spell. So Thunderscrim was sealed off for 30 years because the king of Thunderscrim, King James, has what's called the Ethereum Stone inside of him, but he's also kind of is the Ethereum Stone. So how far do I need to back up? So there's the crisis, right? Happened 1300 years ago. So this thing called the Ethereum Shard blasted off of... The beam is powered... Okay, let me back up even further. The beam, which is what holds the dimensions together, or the planes of existence together, it is essentially a rock called the Ethereum Stone, and that's what powers it. But nobody knows what it is or where it came from. They think it might even be like the first god, because during the crisis, which is 1300 years ago from now, a piece of the Ethereum Stone shot off, and it went through the beam and caused the crisis, which was where every sentient life form from every plane was dumped into the material plane. And so all the gods and demons and everything else from everywhere, like the Feywild, they originally found their way back eventually. But, and like where some gods like stayed too long, there's like an imprint of that god's kind of, thing there. But, so the Ethereum Stone went through the beam, made the crisis, and then crashed into a place up north, which is where eventually Thunderscrum was settled. And so then, fast forward to the early 1300s in the Third Era, King James was in his mom's stomach, etc. And his mom touched the Ethereum Stone because instead of Thunderscrum just now made thermal power, they did it when the Ethereum Stone went missing because they used to power everything through the Ethereum Stone. And then the Queen Maria, who is King James's mom, touched it, and it went into her and plunged Thunderscrum into a power crisis and everything. And so these two wizards that the King Martin hired, he hired them to look for the stone and try to get it back out of Maria because thought it was in her, but really it was King James the whole time. So they think the Ethereum Stone might be the original god because it has a conscience, and King James is widely revered as he's like a saint. He's the current champion of Ilmater, and so when the Dark Month happened, that was because the wizards that were hired to find the Ethereum Stone finally realized it was inside King James, and so they kidnapped him, and using that power, they sealed off Thunderscrum with the time dilation spell. And so the only person who could escape was August, who was also rumored to be King James's lover. The King James was being tortured by these wizards to try to find a way to get the Ethereum Stone out of him, and August spent the next 30 years searching for King James, and Thunderscrum's a notoriously anti-magic society, and so August had to learn magic in order to learn, scrying and locate creature and everything else. But in that time he kind of gave up for a while, and because James worshipped Ilmater, and because August worshipped Soon, he made them team up. So he made Soonites focus more on inner beauty, mental health. And the Ilmatari are notoriously they all have PTSD because they've all suffered or something. And so he made them come together and make these mental hospitals. And so even now that he's rescued King James, he still mostly does the hospital stuff. So the Teamwork Festival in Phandalin is sponsored by these hospitals. And so a lot of it is stuff like Alcoholics Anonymous classes, and sex ed classes, and stuff like that. If you're adventurers are usually, stereotypically orphans with terrible childhoods. And so it's since Phandalin is geared toward adventurers, the Teamwork Festival is geared toward helping those adventurers become better people and more healthy and everything. And so there's a lot of classes, and there's the Trial of Teamwork, which is just a team building, low ropes course exercise. But I'm gonna read you August Giveth's speech. Let me read his flavor text as well. Yeah, he's August Giveth is 9'11", because he's a half giant. There's a joke that you're not a real half giant unless you're 10 feet tall, so that's why he's 9'11". But he's got dark brown hair, a square head. He wears, now that he's a magic user, he wears, kind of fancier clothes, because he doesn't actually live in Thunderscrum anymore. He's been kind of exiled to Golgari, but he comes to still visit King James. He's a champion of Soon, and the most powerful mortal magic user on the material plane. He was the first half-giant to be in the Blackguard in Thunderscrum ever, because Thunderscrum is notoriously, or historically, racist. So when they founded Thunderscrum in this crater, there was a party of Raven Queen cultists who would think of them as Mormons. They were in a different continent, and they were, so far outside of their standard religious kind of, bearing that they were forced to go somewhere else. And they were wandering, and the crisis happened, but they found this cool crater, and let's go check it out. And there's also some half-giants there that met on the way, and so they decided to settle the town together. But then the human Raven Queen cultists were hey, we're better at math, and you guys are super strong, so what if you do the manual labor, and we'll do all the taxes and everything. And so they kind of talked them into becoming a lower class of people immediately. And
And so Thunderscram's been like historically very, very racist, and King James is kind of responsible for kind of correcting that in like a civil rights movement kind of thing, because they had a rebellion, but he made like the first Bill of Rights, and he, put half giants on the municipal court system, and he made sure like the hiring process for the guard was fair, and he just made like a lot of legal kind of like, there's still racism there, but legally it's much, much better. And so like people speculate that because August is King James's lover, that they August Giveth is been influencing him to do these civil rights things on behalf of half giants, which could be true, or people just think that James is a great guy, so it's kind of you'd have to ask him. But and August, while he's the most powerful mortal on the planet, he still only has a 7 charisma. So I'm gonna try to act here. And he's reading off a script, so just imagine that. So, hello, my name is August Giveth. I'm the founder of the soon Ilmater Hospital conglomerate. You may know me as the Magic Research and Defense Specialist for Thunderscram. We, the SMI, which is the abbreviation for soon Ilmater Hospital, are a non-profit dedicated to mental health awareness and treatment. We started way back in 1337. If you don't mind, I'd like to tell you my story. I've struggled with OCD my entire life, and because of it, I was ostracized by my family and my community when I was only 13 years old. But I found friendship in the most unlikely of places. The king, then Prince of Thunderscram, James Crethuzar. We met when I became the first non-human to ever join the Blackguard, which guards the royal family personally. Part of why we bonded is because he struggled with depression and crippling PTSD. After the rebellion, King James was kidnapped by the court wizards, Kenneth and Mordred, and they locked Thunderscram behind them, sealing it in a time bubble, and cutting the city off from the rest of the world. I was the only one who made it out, so I searched for 30 years to find my king and my friend and bring him back home. For the first 10 years I worked alone, trusting no one and getting effectively nowhere. So I gave up. At least part of me did, but my friend's struggles and my own were still very heavy on my mind, and so I worked with the Church of Soon, the goddess of beauty, both inside and out, and the Ilmatari, whose trademark is that the members of their church have suffered pretty much, they've all pretty much suffered in life, which is why they worship the god of suffering in the first place. Together we founded the first mental hospital in Stone Garden and shut down the asylum there, which was famous for, and I mean, for lack of better words, they tortured mentally ill people, so shutting them down was a win for everybody. We built that hospital, and we got urgent requests immediately to build one in Nagamesh, which at the time didn't even have a regular hospital, much less one for invisible illnesses. And then we built one in Rivermouth and Profundus, and we just announced our third facility in Golgari, which would be our largest yet, with the capacity for 300 patients to be completed in 1380. And I thought, all those years ago, maybe I can't find James, maybe Thunderscram's lost, I'm just one person, I can't do it alone. But then I started telling other people my story. I started sharing what I was struggling with, and the people helped me. The people I've been working with, the churches and the hospitals, when I reached out to them, they reached back. And because of that, and because of those people, that is why the king and kingdom of Thunderscram were saved. I love coming to the Teamwork Festival every year. And by the way, let's give a big hand to Mr. Chad Hampton. By the way, breaking from his speech, Chad Hampton is a man who wears jorts. They're Donald Denham brand jorts, and he invented sunscreen just so he could put too much of it on his nose. Imagine that. Thank you to Mr. Chad Hampton for putting this on for us. He and his team works all year round to put this thing together. It's the 9th one of these, looking at big number 10 next year, and I think they've done a bang-up job. Best one yet, so please give them a hand. Anyway, I love the Teamwork Festival because teamwork is really what being an adventurer is all about. It's not about the money or the glory, it's the people you help and the friends you make along the way. No matter how powerful you become, it's very hard to do things alone. Also, the festival is, of course, free, but if you have the coin to spare and you want to help us keep going, if you found one of the seminars helped you and you're feeling generous, donations are, of course, accepted. Thank you very much, be safe, take care of yourselves, and have fun out there. Yeah. And so, they see Yaga for the first time, and, like, you know, magic radiates off this dude. Like, you can kind of feel it in the air. This is also where we had John, who plays Kit in this game now. He had a character named Tatiana, who was a chaotic evil warlock. So, like, she worshipped Morgath, like, had, like, this pact blade kind of thing. And she joined the Young Adventurers Guild, which is a guild for adventurers who are underage. It's led by a 20-year-old dwarf named Mark, and they just advocate for young adventurers they don't get, like, take advantage of in jobs, or, like, just taken advantage of because they're not adults yet, even though they're out there killing dragons and stuff. And, Eli Locke is actually a founding member, an alumni of the Young Adventurers Guild, and he occasionally does, like, you know, pro bono investigations for them if they find out, like, somebody's been, like, kidnapped or abused or something. And so Tatiana also, at this teamwork festival, Leo, our bard, charmed her during the, like, trial of teamwork, because she was gonna, like, mess it up or something. I don't remember the exact detail, I didn't write it down, but Leo charms Tatiana, and Morgath, who talks to Tatiana through the blade, is like, "You're weak, don't let it happen again." And so, to blow off steam, Tatiana went and murdered 2 people. And, so, Eli Locke had to come to investigate the murders, but they kind of, like, you know, danced around it, and, like, Tatiana hid in the woods while he was investigating. They just claimed she had disappearing disease. So, right. Also in this game, Leo the Bard starts flirting with this woman named Allie Mayra. I think he just called her Allie. But she's like a half-elf dwarven ranger. And she was there at the teamwork festival because she and her brothers are all adventurous as well. And so, like, her and Leo are kind of dating now. So you hear them mention that's why. They're kind of an adventuring party. It's called Desert Storm, because they're from, like, really far, like, in the southwest of Acadia. Alimente is her name, I'm sorry. Half-elf ranger. Her brothers are Grim, Joth, Clem, who are all Goliath barbarians, and then her other brother is Daniel, a human wizard. She's from the Clan Machina on the Edwards Plateau. In Clan Machina, women are expected to go out and, like, you know, have kids, like 16, just have as many kids as possible for the, like, good of the tribe or whatever. And, like, the men and old women, like, raise them back home with the tribe. And when it was time for Alimente to go and, like, you know, go out and start having kids, she expressed to her brothers that she didn't want to, and so they all left the clan and became adventurers. And the brothers have made it extremely clear that if Leo, you know, hurts Alimente's feelings, they're gonna, like, you know, break his spine or whatever. Which is kind of fun. And, like, the whole adventurer, like, there's, at the Teamwork Festival, there's, like, tons of seminars about, like, you know, anti-drug campaigns. And so at this place, Leo bought some devil grass, which is just weed, and, you know, smoked it with Alimente, which is funny because Pale's a killjoy. Anyway, they eventually made friends with the Desert Storm brothers while Leo was with Alimente. While Detective Eli Locke is in town to investigate the murder, which happens to be Tatiana, who's a member of their party, he also mentions to the party that he has a job for them as, like, a side gig. He says that there's somebody, the Stone Garden nobles have hired him to investigate some gun smuggling, because the, like, officials or the powers that be noticed there's more guns than what were, like, reportedly being imported into the city based on tax records, and so they're worried there's going to be, like, an insurrection because of all the class struggles that have been happening. Because Stone Garden is run by, like, an oligarchy of, like, mages. So it was Stone Garden is the first dwarven city in the world, and so it's absolutely huge. It's the side of a volcano. There's what's called the rose cap. It's just a big ruby they've cut like this incredible like tapestry into, and it's the very top of the volcano, so it bathes the entire rest of the city, and it's like red, kind of pinkish glow. It has like the cultural significance of like, the pyramids, because this town is so old, and it's the dwarven city. And so originally there's been dwarven royalty this whole time, and in recent years, probably I think it's 30 years ago now. I don't have the history in front of me, but it's about 30 years ago. There was a rebellion led by this oligarchy of mages and this kind of mercenary army called the Blue Shields. The Blue Shields were hired to go invade Stonegarden, overthrow the royalty, and then allow the oligarchy of mages to take power. And they killed all of the royal family except for one. Her name is Princess Delma Stonehammer, and she's been living in the kind of, they call it the Rose Cap. It's the very, very top of the city where all the elite are. And she's been under house arrest literally her entire life. And so while the Blue Shields have they've stopped being more of a mercenary force and turned more into police and town guard and everything like that. And they actually guard a couple more towns outside of Stonegarden, almost the whole kind of all the small towns in the east and Stonegarden. Though Donald Denham has been trying to arm his own citizens and have their own police force, in order to get away from the kind of power of Stonegarden. So the Eli Locke hires the party to go investigate, and they find bits of propaganda and graffiti and stuff, leading to Eli Locke was I don't think there's a rebellion. I think it's just cheaper to smuggle in guns and everybody wants one. But he's just go investigate anyway, just so I could say that I did it, and at least say that I sent somebody to go check it out for them, to put the powers that be in Stonegarden at ease. And so they go and find propaganda, and they realize that there's kind of a hidden message in the poster, and they find this speakeasy where these kind of eggheads are debating what kind of government they're going to set up when they overthrow the mages and replace, they're going to put their plan is to put Princess Delma Stonehammer back in power, because the dwarven royalty was corrupt, which is why the citizens supported putting the mages in power. But now the mages are even worse, so they're going to go back to Delma and just hope that she's better. So they find this propaganda, but the guys escape. They catch one of these politics nerds, and then Tatiana, the warlock, just kills them over and over, while Pale, who's the fire genasi cleric, heals them. And so they had a big long debate about whether healing someone is technically necromancy. This guy they're torturing tells them where Mr. Shadow is based. Mr. Shadow's one of the lead smugglers in town, and it's underneath the Stonehammer Lodge, but it doesn't know anything else. And so they go to the Stonehammer Lodge and talk to this guy named Wade, who's the bouncer. He's a human man with a big scar on his face. It's they're in the Stonehammer Lodge, and he's just sitting by the door to the kitchen. And Wade gives Leo the Bard a more aggressive propaganda, but Wade gives Leo a propaganda flyer that's way more aggressive than the other one, and tells him about what they call book club, which is a meeting of citizens to try to get them to go over onto the rebellion side. He tells them the hidden location and the passwords to get in the next meeting. They go to the Smokehouse Forge and talk to George Foreman, who's also a follower of Tyr, which is, I'll admit that was a DM trick to get Pale Talon, the Fire Genasi cleric, to trust them, because he's a cleric of Tyr. But, and they go to the meeting and talk about how the Magocracy is running people into debt on purpose in order to keep them down. It's how they control people, because they control how much people are paid and how much things are cost. And so it's just a horrible, cyclical kind of system. And George Foreman tells them to go talk to the boss back at the Stonehammer Lodge, which the players had spent like all night trying to figure out, like trying to get out of Wade how they got into the speakeasy they had been told about. But literally all they had to do was just walk confidently into the kitchen and go into the trapdoor. It was a lot of fun to torture them that way, because the solution is so easy, but then you just keep smiling and not telling them. So they go to this place, it looks like a speakeasy. There's like people doing drugs and drinking, and like people have guns that they don't have serial numbers or anything. And they realize that this is a fake speakeasy meant to trick the Blue Shields into thinking they've just found a drug den and not their rebel hideout. But they go into another door that is actually the real speakeasy. And they see that Donald Denham is there, making a deal with who they think is Mr. Shadow. This place is also, it not only is the Revolution kind of like nexus, it also is just a speakeasy with like a bar, and there's like drugs and people doing the drugs. And so Pale Talon kind of freaked out, if I remember correctly. But so Mr. Shadow, his name is actually Gilbert Kane. He's like a blue-eyed, blonde-haired elf. Let me see if I wrote down how old he is. No, I haven't written down how old he is. Yeah, but so they meet Mr. Shadow, and then Mr. Shadow kind of like recognizes Leo, because Leo only has been changing his clothes. Like, he has like alternate kind of identities, but he is not able to change his face at that point. And so like Mr. Shadow tells Leo that he's actually, like, when he recognizes Leo, he's like, actually, hey, you're my son, and I didn't mean to walk out on you. It just kind of happened. Because the whole party kind of discovered, Leo grew up in Edgewater, which is like a very small kind of like fishing village, and he got up to all kind of shenanigans with his friend Lorifear, but Lorifear eventually got like murdered. And before Leo's mom had told him all his life, like, your dad was just like a one-night stand, and Leo's a half-elf, I haven't mentioned that before, and so Leo just thought, this whole time that like his dad just never had been around. And so he just grew up with his mom and Lorifear, and that was it. But Mr. Shadow tells them that his name is actually Gilbert Kane. He had been like watching Leo his whole life from like the shadows, because he didn't when he wasn't actually just a one-night stand. He actually was in love with Leo's mom, but then he had to eventually tell her that he was actually a smuggler. And so she's like, get lost, get out of my life. And he's like, that's fair. I don't want the kid to grow up in that kind of environment either. And so he's been kind of watching Leo from the shadows his whole life. Like, there was even a kind of a famine in Edgewater. And then his mom, all of a sudden had money. And Leo's like, where'd you get that? And she's like, I'm never going to tell you. But it was from Gilbert. And so they have kind of a Tier 4 reunion. They say when Leo's mom died, Gilbert was going to go get him. Like, go get Leo, because he's like an adult then at that point, so he could make a decision to, be around smugglers or to, stay out of the kind of family business. But they went to go find him, but at that point Leo had already gone kind of like on his journey, and he was like changed his disguise so often and was so good at like blending in that even Gilbert's like top men could never find him again. And so when he finally just, walks into his secret hideout out of nowhere, Gilbert freaks out when he sees him. But he gives Leo how to disguise, like, meant to give them, after Yennefer died. Yennefer's Leo's mom. Also, Leo's whole thing is disguises. Like, at first he had, like, just a ton of costumes, but I'm like, this is never gonna work until I give him how to disguise. And it's working better since then. And he tells him that he actually knows what happened to Lorifear when Lorifear went missing. Lorifear was murdered by the like town mayor in Edgewater, and so he's come back as a revenant, and like, or he hasn't come back yet. They have his bones, and there's this mushroom. There's several drugs in my world. Like, there's an addiction system and like sanity points. So I'll explain that later, I think. But so there's this mushroom called Ravensbane, and Ravensbane, relating to the Raven Queen, because you take this mushroom and you hallucinate so hard you go into the spirit realm, and you can actually lose sanity points because the trip is so bad, but you can talk to like ghosts and stuff. without being a kind of religious person. And so when Gilbert's like men found Laura Fear's body, they like took the bones with them and have spoken to them with Ravensbane, and found out that like he's gonna come back as a revenant like soon. So they have Leo take Ravensbane to talk to his friend Laura Fear, and Laura Fear asks him to help him get revenge so he can pass him to the other side. After that, because this whole kind of like revolution is based on guns, like all the guns have cool names, like the Equalizer, the Mage Hunter, the Standard Issue. That's like the basic level guns. Like there's more as you kind of level up. The same as every weapon, but Gilbert gives them all like the basic guns that he's handing out to everyone else in the revolution. Kind of felt like bonding moments a little bit. And because during Leo's Ravensbane hallucination, he also saw the Maw vision, which Pale has seen before when he's talking to Tyr. They tell, Gilbert that Detective Eli Locke sent him, and he freaks out. Oh, I didn't even mention, previously in Phandalin, they had taken a job to, like, this kid had been kidnapped by goblins. And so, they go to, like, hunt the goblins, only to find out that the reason the goblins kidnapped the kid in the first place was that they had, like, seen the dad beating the kid so bad, like, I know we're goblins, but, like, we can't just let this slide. And so they beat the dad up, and then took the kid, and have been raising this, like, 2-year-old in the woods. When they can barely even speak common, they're just, like, teaching the kid goblin and stuff. And goblins are still technically, goblins and orcs are still classified as monsters. They can't own land or anything, which is almost kind of forcing them into if you can't own land and you're not allowed to have a job, you are like, forced into a life of crime, because what else can you do to support yourself? It's like a very, also, like, kind of a civil rights movement for goblins and orcs. Right. And so, half-orcs is usually fine, but orcs are still classified as monsters, and so it's very rough for them. So, they were going to kill the goblins and take the kid back, but then they learned that the goblins were actually the good guys, so they left the kid there with the goblins, and just lied to the job board people saying the kid was dead. So they'd like stop the hunt for the goblins. And so, Tyr sends Pale Talon a dream, like, your work is unfinished. And so they go to Stone Mill, and they talk to, like, the dad of the, like, kid who hit, like, the dad who, like, beaten the kid so bad, and they, eventually track him down, and they find out he has, like, another wife, he has a wife and another daughter, that he also, like, beats really bad, and, like, they tell Laura that they were the ones to find the, little kid, and they tell her that the kid is still alive, and so the mom, like, freaks out, packs a bag, and, like, just starts walking into the woods to go find her baby, who's, like, been stolen by goblins. And so, in the interim, like, some of the party follow her, and some of the party stay behind to kill the dad, whose name is Wesley. But, so they kill him, and then they go with, the wife to go, like, meet up with the goblins, and, like, her husband had been working for this ranch, and so the ranch, like, owned the land they lived on, and so as soon as he's dead, like, she'd be homeless, which is why she stayed with him even after he was abusive. But, when the party tells her, like, hey, we just killed your husband, she was like, oh, great, now I'm homeless and also gonna be, like, battery to murder. But the goblins tell her that because they can't buy land, they will, like, they have money, they just can't buy land, but they want to become farmers, and, like, actually be, like, citizens, and, like, have a place to live, like, permanently, and not just live in the woods and go steal stuff. But, so they say, like, if she buys the land for them, and teaches them how to farm and everything, like, they'll, like, support her and her kids, and so it's, like, a happy ending kind of a thing. Right. So they head, back to Stone Garden, talk to Detective Eli Locke, like, saying, oh, we haven't found anything, even though they've met the leader of the revolution, he's not the leader. They find out also that, Donald Denham is the actual leader of the revolution, because he's just a hero among the working class for what he's done in his 3 towns. He's a powerful man, but he can't do magic, and his mages are horrible, and so he's a hero of the folks, and so he's kind of financing the whole thing. they're buying guns from Thunderscram under the table in exchange for rings of warmth. And Thunderscram won't say what they want the rings for, but they can only assume just because it's really cold in Thunderscram. Because they're above the cold line, so whenever they leave the crater, it's like, negative 20 all the time. But so under the table, they're trading guns for money and rings of warmth. And so they talk to Detective Eli Locke, and Eli comes to talk to the gun they said they got off, or they, after realizing that they just, murdered someone, they went back to, they realized that they murdered someone, and they realized that they needed somebody to pin the revolution on, to trick Angus, and so they were going to frame Wesley Thola, who didn't even live in Stone Garden. They're going to frame him for smuggling guns into Stone Garden. He's just some cowboy, but they were going to frame this guy. Yeah, okay, as the DM, I couldn't tell them that was a dumb idea, but I thought it the whole time. But the way I'm going to edit that part out, because it was really amazing how they got out of it. But, so they framed, I'll go ahead and tell you. So, Leo, with the How to Disguise he got from Gilbert, he disguised himself as Wesley and took the gun that Gilbert gave him and started just shooting it in the street and going, I got this from the I'm smuggling guns into town, and everyone was like, oh my god, Wesley, what's wrong with you? Because then everyone in town knows he's a shitty person because he beats his family, but now it's a new level of, so they evade the town guard. It was spectacular, a miracle. I wish I had been recording so bad, but another one will come that way. Anyway, so they tell Eli Locke that they got this gun off Wesley, and Eli is a level 20 wizard, but he can't do magic, but he still has, the same stats. He's got a plus 15 perception, plus 15 insight, so you cannot lie to this man. And at this point they're only level 2, and they suck at lying, so he knows that lying about there is a revolution after all, and so he knows that this is the third gun he's encountered. People know that Thunderscram's mass producing guns, but they don't know that they're selling them under the table for the revolution, and so Eli Locke realizes this is the third gun he's found of Thunderscram make, because Thunderscram is famous for producing mithril, so their forges are insane, so even when they melt steel, it's still in a mithril forge, so the steel is a different quality, and you can tell you can tell that it's made there because their smithing process is so unique. And so Eli Locke knows that this gun is from Thunderscram, and the party doesn't really know what he does with that information. Then they go to, even though Leo had the disappearing disease at the time, they went to Edgewater without him, and went with Quentin. Quentin is Gilbert's best friend. So Gilbert's an elf, and then Quentin's a dwarf. But the whole time, Quentin is leading on about how he's the most important man in Gilbert's life, and he's, Leo's never going to be as special. He doesn't say it outright, but he tells 100 stories about stuff him and Gilbert have gotten over, done in the past 50 years. To the effect where the party can realize that Quentin's kind of in love with Gilbert, but Gilbert has a girlfriend and does not feel the same. And his girlfriend, by the way, Gilbert's girlfriend is, her name's Catherine Drake. She's a fellow smuggler in town, but a different kind of smuggling company. And so Gilbert is Mr. Shadow, which is kind of a Dread Pirate Roberts kind of a situation. And so Catherine Drake was warring with the previous Mr. Shadow, and it's it's a gang war kind of between their folks. But so when Gilbert came to power, he seduced her, just as a trade deal, as a political ploy. But then they find out they actually like each other. But they still allow their men to fight each other, just because they think that's a Mr. and Mrs. Smith thing. It's fun to keep it a secret. And so, but even though Gilbert is with Catherine Drake, Quentin is extremely obviously jealous of her, and obviously jealous of Leo, because Quentin's actually the one who convinced Gilbert to leave without fighting Leo's mom in the first place, because he's got a crush on him. Anyway, and it's very obvious. As they take a ship they have Laura Fear's bones, because he'll become a revenant when they take him back to Edgewater. And so they take a sailing ship, and they steal. They get robbed by pirates on the way there, and they steal the pirate boat, which I did not expect. And I meant to, in the first episode of Campaign 2, I meant to make them pay to get Dennis out of jail, because like if they had all the money from the boat, it was like 2,000 gold. If they had all the money, it would like ruin the game economy. But then I meant to have them pay to get Dennis out of jail to take some of that money back from them. But then I like forgot about it, and so they still have the money and they got Dennis out of jail for free. I'm like, no, whoops. Anyway, yeah. So they eventually get to Edgewater, and like Leo actually appears. They realize that Leo's house is still there, but it's like abandoned. Like the people, like, you know, it's like a trap house now, basically. But they kind of go there to camp, and they meet the mayor, who's a murderer. Like, he's the one who murdered Laura Fear, or at least that's what Laura Fear says. And so, and there's more jokes there about how Tatiana is like, we can't bring any Revenant back. It's necromancy. That's terrible. We can't do it. And Pale's like, no, it's good necromancy. They have a whole 5-minute conversation every time. But they meet the mayor, and they learn that there are like 4 other people in town who are like big bad kind of guys, right? And so, in addition to like these 4 other like kind of evil people, there's like one guy who's just the mayor's bodyguard, who's a follower of Soon and reads romance novels while he's on shift. But the rest of them were just kind of like, you know, boring bad guy number 2. Except for Justice Cartwright, who was a follower of Lolth. So, Tatiana, who was a warlock of Morgath, was also revered Lolth because Tatiana was a drow. And so she convinced Justice Cartwright to like go against his friends, otherwise Lolth was going to forsake him. Because he worshipped. Anyway. And so they learn the mayor's schedule. And they plan to like ambush him on the way home. It's like while they're waiting for that to happen, they go and raise Laura Fear, and they decide that they're going to like. So Laura Fear would go to heaven when he killed Rowan Farlight, who's the mayor, but the other people were like there also when he was murdered. So he wants to kill them, but they're not his main goal. But they decide like while they're waiting on the mayor to be in position, they're going to go murder somebody else, who's the, her name was Eleanor, and, so Quentin gave Leo some poison, and so Leo's like, well, I'm going to go poison Eleanor, because she's a Fed, you know, anyway, so they give it to her in her coffee, and she still doesn't die. And that's also when, Leo found the squirrel named Gray, because Tatiana could talk to animals as part of the Pact Blade thing. And so now Leo just has a pet, a squirrel, who has PTSD now because all it's lived through. At this point, Pale had disappearing disease, and so Leo dressed up as Pale, and they fed Eleanor. They convinced like the doctor that had come after they poisoned Eleanor that, like, you know, this is some magical potion of tear, and if she's a just person, she'll be saved, but if not, she'll, like, totally die. It's like the doctors aren't going to admit, hey, this lady is super corrupt because she's the tax office in a, like, you know, like a lawless western kind of place. But so they give her the potion, but it's actually just alchemist fire, and so they slowly burn this woman to death, and convince the people of the town that it was, like, holy judgment from Tyr. And so, right, and then still dressed up as Pale, real Pale comes back from disappearing disease, and they stab each other. Or, no, real Pale stabbed Leo dressed as Pale. Especially when he found out that he killed someone dressed as him. They did more recon on the house, like, snuck into Rowan Farlight's house to go kill him. Because the original plan, like, wasn't gonna work. I don't remember why. But, yes, they have the big fight in, like, the upstairs hallway, which is, like, it was a really fun fight because it was, like, just such close quarters. And also, like, Rowan Farlight's kid was there, and they had to, like, keep shoving him in his bedroom. He's like, Daddy, what's happening? And, like, you're gonna die, kid, get back! You know, everyone here has a gun, go away! And so, they had the fight, and they Justice Farlight, I rolled for it, and he was convinced by Tatiana to betray his friends on behalf of Wolf. And Quentin had been waiting for like his moment to kill Leo because he was so jealous of him, and so he chose that moment to shoot him in the back. And we shouldn't kill Leo, obviously, but they decided to let Tyrion Fenwick, the guard, go, who was like the romance novel guy. And then we had we had trouble here. A disagreement, which I'm glad we got out of the way, because like the rest of the party was like good alignment, but then Tatiana was like chaotic evil. And then so John's just super into roleplay and like didn't realize how like I do arcs. So there's a portion of every part of the campaign that is like about a specific. The side quests will all have to do with like that character's backstory. So like a backstory is like a big, important mechanic in the game. Because when something's not happening in the main storyline or the main quest, we're doing backstory stuff. So this has all been part of Leo's. This first arc has been all about Leo's backstory. But then John, Tatiana didn't really realize how like serious it was. And so he thought it'd be funny if Tatiana went and killed Rowan Farlight before Lorafear could, so Lorafear was like robbed of his revenge. But and I should have stopped him, but I didn't, and I just feel terrible about it because it was like I was worried we were gonna have to like end the game because tensions were so hot. But we kind of, I should have had the gods intervene, to keep it in the story, but. It's a mistake I won't be making again. It was like just a big learning moment about, knowing how much stuff means to people. But so... Yeah, so, but Pale raised Rowan back enough to where Lorafear could kill him a second time, and then Lorafear was able to have his moment with Leo, and to like thank him for helping him get revenge, and he passed on. Now immediately after that, during all the ruckus and the gunfire and everything, every town in Mercadia has a bank, and and people keep the accounts straight through the switchboard. And the switchboard is based in Golgari, and it's just like a huge network of like scribes with like stones of far speech running to every bank in every town. So you could like wire your money across, because like if you're carrying 1,000 gold, that's like 40 pounds of metal. Like no one thinks about that. But so there's actual banks, and so like they also use the banks as like an emergency radio system. So when they hear the gunfire and the shooting and like people dying, the guards are like, okay, town guard, like this is too big for us, and so they call in. There's like a group of adventurers that are always on call in Golgari. It's like if one of the towns has a problem that's too big for the guards to deal with, they'll just send them, they'll teleport them there. And so the Harris Puyo party, which is the second novel I've written, I'm only like 5 chapters in, but I'm working on that one still. But it's the second novel I've written about in this same setting. This happens after the novel, obviously, but they've all retired and become the on-call folks for Golgari. And so they appear right as the kind of fighting stops, and so it's like just a never-ending kind of battle for the party, and they kind of like diffuse the situation, and so the Leo, very angry about what Tatiana did, like almost jeopardizing his friend, like going to hell forever. They frame Tatiana for all the murders. And because Tatiana has like a history of like being violent to necromancers, they just said like this crazy drow bitch came in, started killing everybody. We were on the streets, we came to rescue him, and so that's why everyone's dead. And so they just arrested Tatiana and Justice Cartwright, who was also a follower of Lolth, and took him back to Golgari to be tried for murder. Because usually they would try them in Edgewater, because it's the town where the murder happened, but because they killed the only judge in town, they're taking them to Golgari until they can get a new government here to try them for real. Or try them officially. Because they refer to Golgari as the capital city because it's the biggest town and has like kind of the biggest reach over the others, but it's still not as controlling as Song Carell, which people are scared that it will be. I'll explain Song Carell later. I'll come back to it. But so they arrest them, and then right. So at this time we got another player named Stacy who wasn't here last game, but and then we had John's new character, Kit, and they start to. Kit's whole thing is that he's from. He's like a mercenary from Thunderscrim who's like helping the revolution, like he's helping smuggle the guns over, and so he works for Wade, because Wade, the party thought was just the bouncer, but actually he's like kind of the emissary for Thunderscrim spies, which no one really knows that except for them now. But so Kit and Ace are both kind of these Thunderscrimian spies, and they were sent by Wade to go track down Leo and the rest of the party, because like from their perspective they're like, yeah, apparently our guy who's like, you know, leading the revolution and doing all the smuggling is has a son. One, that's one curveball. Then two, they're leaving town right before the revolution, and so they thought it was just fishy, and so Wade sent Ace and Kit to go, like, you know, watch them. Yeah, and so like to make a distraction to make the Harris PO party leave, they set the house on fire. And so like they were, I was gonna give them like time to loot, but I'm like, well, the house is on fire now, so. But they do go into the basement, thankfully, and in the basement they find Jasmine, and Jasmine is a 4-inch tall fairy who is trapped in a trunk, and like when they're searching all the bodies, like Rowan Farlight and everybody, they find that Rowan Farlight, the murderous mayor, has a journal that's like just obsessions about fairies, you know, to a sick kind of degree. And so he's been keeping Jasmine the fairy like locked up in his basement in like a trunk on a chain. And so he's been like torturing her and stuff. And so they find out that Jasmine is the familiar to a necromancer who's been. She claims that he was an accountant who figured out that Eleanor was embezzling, so he confronted her, and so they raided his house, and they found out he was doing necromancy, and so he got arrested for unlicensed necromancy. Because in Macadia, you have to have a license to do it. There's like rules and regulations, like it's almost as much, I'd say, as like, you know, being a doctor. I don't know, but there's rules and regulations like what you can do with necromancy. It's super, super expensive to be a necromancer, and or be a necromancer legally. And so they decide to go help Jasmine because she makes a very pitiful case, and I made them feel bad for her. So they were gonna go. They were like, we're not gonna go rescue Dennis. We're not gonna promise that because he's a necromancer and gross. But we'll go talk to the guy. If we have time before the revolution, fine, we'll go. And so, because literally every government leader in this town was murdered, who else shows up other than Eli Locke, the detective? Leo, having the highest charisma, tried to lie, but I'm like, you know, that obviously doesn't work with the detective. And he finally forces out of Leo about the revolution, and so Eli Locke admits that he's for the revolution because he has like the powers that be in Golgari. He works all over, but like, you know, he's been asked to like cover up stuff, like, you know, the governments will hire him to find some investigation or whatever, but they find out that it's their own people, and it's like, oh, well, Mr. Detective, just, you know, forget about that, here's your money. And so he's very tired of being kind of, you know, pushed under the rug and disrespected by these, like, magic users who think they're all so posh and pretentious and everything. And so he's just tired of justice being suppressed, is what he communicates to the party. And so he agrees to cover up everything about the investigation with Rowan Farlight in Edgewater, because when Leo finally explains the truth that he's trying to help his friend get revenge, he's like, well, that's a just cause. And so he agrees they'll cover it up for them, to the forces in Golgari, and agree and go along with that it was Tatiana. And Leo also gives Eli Mr. Farlight's book about Jasmine, and just to further prove that Rowan Farlight was an evil kind of psychopath kind of guy. And that's where we started episode 1 of Campaign 2. So, for Campaign 3, the squad kind of meets, they go on I gave them the premise of you have to be somebody who's of kind of a socio-economic importance, because in Campaign 3, they start out in Songcorel, which is basically the equivalent of, like, North Korea, but it's the size of Texas. It's the continent to the south of Macadia, where Campaign 2 takes place. So everything in the society is extremely regulated. There's kind of like a caste system. There's very strict kind of rules about who you are and what you can be. And so they couldn't just be random peasants or anything, because they'd just be executed as soon as they kind of did anything, because anyone who's of any kind of political importance, they are quickly dealt with to keep the status quo. So I gave them the, like, parameters of you have to be somebody who's either like a child of somebody important, or you have to be somebody important. And if you weren't someone of that, you had to give me an extremely good, like, backstory as to why you would be allowed to kind of advance in this society, which all of them did. They didn't go with the brief. I think Druck, who has not appeared in the podcast yet, is the only one who was like, yeah, I'm a military officer because, like, I'm a lineage of... And everyone else is just some random person that, like, happened to be allowed to, so they didn't follow the brief. Anyway, I'm not bitter, don't worry about it. They all made it work. So, Songcorel is like a very kind of Australian, I'd say, in climate. There are oases spread around, and it's more tropical on the coast with the cold line to the south. Very few people live below the cold line, and those people who live there are wild, like they're goblins or goblinoids or giants, and they're only allowed to live beyond the cold line because they aren't worth the Empire's time to track down. That's where any kind of undesirable races stem from. Like I said, giants, half-elves, any kind of chromatic dragonborn. The Songcorelian Empire only allows humans, dwarves, pure elves, or metallic dragonborn, and everyone else is kind of considered undesirable. They've actually done kind of a genocide on all orcish kind of folks and other kind of people who are traditionally considered monsters. There's one point in the campaign that the players actually find their first mission is they go to this weapons cache from pre-Empire time, so probably 900 years this place has been sealed up, and they find a half-orc there who was part of the people that resisted against the Songcorelian takeover, because before Songcorel's imperial conquests, there was, like, they had a similar structure to Macadia, where every city was kind of independent and they did their own thing, and they agreed not to mess with each other, but Songcorel City was like, we're just gonna go invade all the other towns and make them part of one kind of central government. But then, so they found a kind of stockpile of the resistance forces pre-Empire, and there was a dead half-orc skeleton there, and none of the players actually knew what a half-orc was, and so they didn't even recognize the skull. That's the kind of severity of the ethnic cleansing they have there. In Songcorel, there are roads, but since the introduction of train transport, the roads that they have in Sankarel are very, very out of maintenance, I suppose, because if you are a common person, you are not allowed to travel. You stay in your one outpost, which they used to be towns, but they renamed them. All the towns had names, they all had things they did, but the Empire has given them just numbers to kind of take away their uniqueness and patriotism, and you're only patriotic to the Empire now. And so they're just numbers, just Outpost 47, Outpost 118, etc. And so only soldiers and logistics folks and certain people of social status are allowed to ride in these trains, because the roads are rarely used and in disrepair, so that's the only really kind of mode of transportation they have, and mode of moving supplies from one place to the other is trains. Civilians are not allowed to carry weapons at all, other than, maybe you might find farming tools or cooking implements on the civilian. People are rewarded for turning in deviants, people who claim they're not loyal to the Empire. The printing of books is extremely regulated. Judicial punishments are extremely swift and cruel, and really the only way for the common man to rise is by joining the military or gain ranks in the incredibly expansive communist sort of logistics system, like moving food grown by farmers around, managing a state factory, ordering imported goods for the high-ranking, or managing a steel foundry, or whatever. So there are some positions that require a higher kind of rank in the caste system from birth. Like, if you were a common person, you'd never be allowed to do this because you haven't been proven loyal to the Empire. Like a state enchanter, or magical research and innovation, education, public health, officers in the military, being like the lord of a city, or military law enforcement and a propaganda maker. You have to be kind of born into that rank. I'd say it's more like a spectrum than boxes, the kind of Empire caste system. There's like farmers and sailors and construction, maintenance, factory workers, and then above that is the management of farms and factories, personal assistants to higher folks, people who mass-produce weapons and magic items that are too dangerous for the population to have or have knowledge of. Anyone who could be considered an artist, logistics of goods and services and people, etc. Above that is like enlisted military, and above like that line of enlisted military, you have to be kind of born into it, is what I was saying earlier. There's like low-level officers in the military, doctors, religious leaders, educators, city-wide logistics folks, educated kind of innovators, like inventors and things. And then above that is generals and empire-wide logistics folks, lords of towns. And then above that is, of course, the emperor himself. For punishments, people don't really get imprisoned, because that's a cost on the empire system. You really just get, executed or demoted, or there's corporal punishment. They don't really have labor camps, because if you think about it, the entire empire is a labor camp. If something's going to be imported into the empire, like a luxury alcohol, or some kind of clothing they can't make here, or some kind of magic item somebody needs to invent something else, or some kind of information, the empire goes and gets it themselves. So there's very little to no smuggling, because the sailors are watched constantly, and there's no way for someone from somewhere else to sneak in something, because the Empire's the one who goes and meets them, and then they talk to one person, and that one person is vetted extremely well, and so there's just nothing that can get in or out, basically. The two kind of major cities that the players have been in is that they were called to a place called League Hazen from their homes to go do their first mission, because the players were chosen to be part of an experimental unit. The experimental kind of place, or the way the government in Sankarel runs experiments on their military is they run it through 5th Division. 5th Division is the kind of division that runs experimental stuff like, mechs and new guns and kind of bio enhancements and everything else. And so they had this idea of, the adventurers in Macadia gained so much power so fast. How do they do it? And so they tried to artificially replicate an adventuring party, and so they chose each of the party members to do this experiment for them. And so they were all called to League Haze in the kind of first game to meet each other and go on a dumb sample mission, which was to clear out the pre-Empire resistance stockpile. League Hazen is basically Las Vegas. Like, if you're in the military and you get allowed to go on leave, you can either go home, do whatever the outpost you're from, or you can go to League Hazen to gamble and drink and everything else that's fun. League Hazen's like the only place where there are like actually employed chefs. There are actual bartenders. There are, shows, performances, plays, theater. There's, a 100-acre golf course. It's there are hotels you can either stay in, or you can stay in Fort Bliss, which is on like the east side of town, where you can stay in the barracks for free if you don't want to pay for a hotel. But there are certain things in Songcorel that are considered like everyone in Songcorel, they get their food for free, they get clothing for free, they get their lodging for free, because they're part of this communist society. But they also get a little bit of walking around money called luxury money, where you can buy alcohol or cigarettes or prostitutes or whatever else. And like in an outpost they might have a tavern, but everyone in that tavern is government employed, So there's like a picture of the emperor on the wall in your local tavern, but you can spend your luxury money there to get a shot of whiskey or whatever. So League Haze is the only site where kind of common folks can get, or at least soldiers can get more luxury items and have a good time if they don't want to go home. There are other kind of towns, but they haven't really been to them. The party hasn't. So the party, met, got to know each other. They went on the stockpile resistance clearing mission. Fought some bugs, don't worry about it. But they found on the half-orc skeleton, they found a journal about, like, how the Empire is basically enslaving everyone, how they're brainwashing everyone, how it's the end of the era, because they're taking over. It's that one resistant soldier's kind of last lament about how the future is bleak and he's going to die here in this cave. Then they relaxed in League Hazen for a while, and they went on the mystery of the missing grain, is what I called it. So there was like this one train that resources in the Empire are kind of strictly regulated because everyone's issued everything, and so generally, like in the published reports, it's all even and everyone's doing well and all that, but the reality is that the outpost soup is going thin. Things are watered down, so if you're out in the Outlands, kind of, people might notice less resources than there were before. So there was some town official that I said one of the players knew, but they helped someone else steal grain and then sell it, and they got half the profits, etc. I put that part in mostly because some of the players are totally pro-Empire. They've drank the Kool-Aid, or rather their characters have, and some of the characters are, they don't believe the Empire propaganda, even though it's all they know. And so that was mostly just to kind of mention to the ones who have drunk the Kool-Aid that maybe there are things that aren't so hunky-dory in the Empire. But they had that person arrested, and that person's definitely getting executed. Whatever. But then they come back to League Hazen, and the entire city and Fort Bliss is shut down. They went to go to try to report, into the base when they got back, and General Trudy, who I have not mentioned before, I don't think. Let me pull up his thing. Yeah, there's General Buchanan Trudy, who's been kind of their operations officer. Because they're part of the experimental unit, and he's in charge of 5th Division, they report directly to him. He's stationed in Fort Bliss, kind of a G.I. Joe kind of a guy. He has a reputation of being, tough and fair, and I have written, he generally has an "I'm too old for this shit" attitude about everything, which he's 56. General Trudy has very dark skin and white hair. In the Empire, mostly people aren't allowed to have a reputation because it makes them too powerful. But General Trudy is allowed to have a reputation because he's famous for reducing the 5th Division's deserter problem, because he sees his troops as people and not just meat for, experiment fodder. Because, if you get your arm ripped off because you're inside a robot too many times, people are just gonna run away and go die in the desert. So because he kind of treats his soldiers better, they stop running away, which it had gotten to the point before him that so many folks had run away, it was costing the Empire too much to go chase them down. So they allow him to have that reputation because even though that's dangerous, it's easier than chasing down deserters. And General Trudy's been in 5th Division his entire military career. So the general comes to get them himself, and he shows them. So a mech is, imagine power armor from Fallout 4. So a mech is basically a golem that you hollow out and then put more armor on, and you can jump inside of it, and with what's called a halo, it's a circlet you wear that telepathically binds you to the golem or mech, and so you're able to drive it and fight with it as though it were your own kind of body. It's a big strength mod, fucks up your dex. I have a whole kind of stats write-up on it. If you're interested, message me and I'll publish it somewhere. But, Kara has been the one who's been kind of anti-Empire the whole time, and so she surrenders the journal that they found on the Resistance half-orc, and she tells General Trudy to read closely, trying to get him to see the propaganda. And he kind of gives her, we'll talk about this later, kind of a look. But they chase the tracks of the mech down into the Lehazen sewers. They fight a monster, and they find this, camp of what they assume were spies and a teleportation circle. They talk to a goblin, he gives them a name, and he gives them, a rough map of the section of the Underdark. And, they report back to the general, and he tells them that the, Arcana team, which basically, Magic Bomb Squad, is going to investigate the teleportation circle and see if they can figure out who, and where it goes. And the general also gives Kara, the talk about, her telling him to see through the propaganda in the journal. I think it'll do me a bit of good to kind of read that to you, because I feel like it gives a lot about the kind of world that they're stuck in. Yeah, so the general gives Kara talk. He says, "Listen, this is the one time, the only time, we are ever going to talk about this, okay? I give everybody one. I give everybody one slip of the tongue. I can hear it once and pretend it was a missed word or something, but I can't do it twice, okay? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? You can't tell anyone that you see this pre-Empire ideology as anything but heresy, okay? You can't tell anyone that the ideas in this book or any other items you find are what you believe. You can think it all you want, but just don't fucking tell anybody, okay? I have a wife. I have children. I give everybody one, like I said, but I don't give two. I can't, okay? and I can guarantee that not a single other person you are ever going to meet for the rest of your life is even going to give you 0. Does that make sense? We will never have this conversation again. Have a good day. Enjoy your stay in League Hazen. And so that's kind of their interaction. Let's see. And then we're introduced to what's called the Fantasy Gashapon, which I will admit I kind of stole from the Adventure Zone. I even saw the name of the guy who runs it, Garfield. So after the kind of mech thing, the Empire wants to test their mettle, and they go what's called a wipe mission. A wipe mission is when they determine that a outpost is so taken by anti-Empire propaganda that none of the people in it could ever be re-educated or saved. And so they go and they kill everyone in the outpost, which is roughly 100 to 200 people. So that doesn't happen very often, because usually they just kill 1s and 2s that have been, kind of poisoned in their eyes. But this time they kill everyone, including, even kids down to the age of 4 or 5, because they're the only ones who probably aren't going to remember this, even if they go or taken somewhere else and re-educated. But, so they do the wipe mission, kill a ton of civilians. I mean, it was just the easiest fight I ever had. I went through gruesome details of them murdering civilians because I was trying to make them feel bad about it. And some did, some didn't. But they take the kids who are too young to be poisoned by anti-Empire propaganda back to the train to be taken to Rockport, which is, they take them back to the same orphanage that Fell is from, because Fell's a half-giant, so he's one of the undesirable races. So, assumably, his mother went below the coal line to some giant, and then had him, and he somehow ended up in a Empire orphanage, and he was taken to work for some wizard that's learn magic. They go back to Rockport into the same orphanage, and they meet Miss Ivy, who's the extremely stern kind of drill sergeant lady who basically raised Fell. And when they get back to League Hazen, they are promoted to corporal as a reward for successfully completing the wipe mission. They get, dress uniforms and learn that the Emperor himself wants to meet them, because General Trudy has been embellishing the reports a little, and the Emperor has been looking for a team to go do something for him. And so they go to the Fantasy Gashapon and see Garfield again. And Garfield, by the way, is a extremely eccentric elf. He talks in a crazy voice like this, and they learn, he will wear, neon green short shorts and a burnt orange vest and a bowler hat that says, juicy on the top, but as well as, gladiator high heels. Just absolutely insane, and even though he works on base, he's allowed to dress that way because he's still technically a civilian. They learn that Garfield is, though he's regulated to working in the Gashapon place, which is a reward for, somebody in the military goes on a successful mission and they get a Gashapon token, as well as being promoted or having a good report. And so they're allowed to have magical items that are too dangerous for civilians, but then also too kind of worthwhile to just be destroyed. And so they give them back to, after they confiscate them from somewhere else in Sankural, they give them back to their military to use in their missions and everything. And so Garfield's kind of in charge of that because he's very familiar with magic items and he knows how to properly store them and catalog them and everything else. And so the party learns that Garfield was the one who figured out how to make halos pair with mech suits, because a halo is basically a car key for a mech. But then the Empire decided he knew too much, but was also too valuable to kill, and so they, demoted him to be in charge of the Gashapon, and he's a little bitter about it. But Garfield invites the party to a like magic user. He calls it a country club meeting, and they go to his party, and it's a total nerd party. They learn about there's a new kind of theory that a couple folks are working on called dimension shifting. It's like plane shifting, but dimensions. And the party hears about the Maw for the first time. There's this other woman named Sarah who, even with the highly powerful magic users in Sankarel, it's still very regulated what kind of spells they can know. Like, even though Garfield's level 20, he's not allowed to know Meteor Swarm. And so he's like, his highest level spells are 7th level spells, but even though he can cast other spells at a higher level, he doesn't know anything more powerful than that, because they don't want him to. They meet a woman named Sarah who, quote-unquote, knows every spell, and Garfield's kind of bitter about that. They meet Garfield's sister, Lucretia. Like, the party's like a lecture about dimension shifting, and only the magic users kind of get it, and everyone else drinks weird martinis, and, weird hors d'oeuvres. But after this party, they go to Sankarel for real, and Sankarel is basically, it's the Sharn from Eberron. It's a city of towers. You can't see the sun at the lowest level because of the bridges and everything. Sankarel City is the home of the 1st Division, which is like Secret Service, espionage, KGB kind of a thing. And so the throne room itself is, or the whole palace, is on a demiplane, so it's impossible to enter without permission from the Emperor himself. The party meets kind of what's called Knights of the Emperor. They are soldiers in mithril plate mail armor that appear to not carry any weapons. The throne room is extremely larger than the tower would seem to accommodate, but because it's in a demiplane, it's allowed to kind of exist. The party meets the Emperor and Ryan and Helea and Genevieve, which I'm going to say several kind of cutscenes from that because they're pretty important. But the Emperor is about 25 years old. He has a harem of 116 women from 30 to 10 years old and has 126 children. Some of his kids are older than his youngest wife. He came to power after killing all of his siblings, like also 100, and then killing his father. Some of his kids have already started to kill each other too. This is a tradition in the Fortinbras family, is that they have as many kids as possible, and then they're all supposed to kill each other. And so the surviving male is supposed to be the Emperor, and the surviving female is what's called the Chancellor, who's like the right-hand man of the Emperor. I said that the Emperor Fortinbras looks like, you ever Google a picture of young Stalin, like that, but, buff as hell, and a couple of scars from fighting his siblings. Let's see, Chancellor Helea she's Claudius Fortinbras's half-sister. Traditionally, the Emperor and Chancellor hate each other, and once one's made Chancellor and one's made Emperor, they'll just kill each other, and then one will be the reigning kind of head of state. But Helea and Claudius are different because the half-siblings decided to work together, because teamwork gave them like a supreme advantage over their other siblings. Claudius prefers to like negotiate, or at least intimidate, because he feels like that's more of a challenge, like he likes to win. Helea, however, like doesn't give a single fuck and will kill anyone. The only problem with that is that it's hard to find good help. Those two decided to work together after Emperor Claudius's mother, Genevieve, she's an oracle, so she saw them killing the Emperor together and several other visions that will become important in a moment. She became one of the Emperor's 100 or so wives because she was like her family was being executed for being exposed to anti-empire propaganda, and she was like, wait, before you kill me, I have this super cool talent. Yeah, she can see the future, and she has over 24 decades of visions that have all come true. Not in the way you might expect, but they have happened, kind of, somehow. So then, there's also Ryan, who is Chancellor Halea's consort. Emperor Fortinbras has 100 wives, but then Halea just has the one husband. Ryan is what I call a himbo to the max. Heart of gold, head full of sand. But Halea's anger issues are so bad that they keep him around, like even during sensitive stuff, because he's the only one who could talk her out of going into a murderous rampage. I have kind of a cutscene for him, like after the party came into the... So the party... they came into the throne room, did all the kind of, customs and courtesies and everything, and the Emperor and Chancellor Halea looked up to Genevieve, and Genevieve nodded to confirm, because she's mute also, but she nodded to confirm, and they dismissed the entire room into a side room. But then Chancellor Halea wanted to talk to the Emperor, and so for that brief moment they were alone, Ryan he poured drinks for the party and gave kind of a speech. He says, yeah, I stopped being afraid that she'd kill me about 6 months ago, I guess. I mean, at first I was terrified, and I'm a terrible actor, and that pissed her off even more, but then, she vented to me once, and I've always prided myself on being a good listener, and she kept venting to me, and she started talking to me about other things, and she asked about my life, and I don't know what she thinks about... I don't know that she thinks about killing me anymore. I mean, hell, Claudius actually told me her body count is down 50% since I came around. He made her go find somebody, just for sex, so she'd relax a little, and somehow it was me. I used to be a leather worker, and that's most of what Outpost 105 is, but then they came saying there was a slot open on the guard, so I volunteered. She came to inspect us while we were in training, boot camp, and I never actually finished, because I guess she asked my drill sergeants about me, and the next day they were like, hey, pack your shit, you're going to Sankarel City. I didn't even know what for. I mean, nobody knew, or at least they didn't say until they brought me here. One of Claudius's wives told me before they were having me get dressed up for the wedding. So Ryan tells himself that she has a stressful job, and him being her punching bag is just him doing his due to the Empire, but he also hangs on to hope because of her monthly body count is down, so if he can do nothing but that, then at least he's doing something to help the people. Yeah, but then Claudius and Halea walked back into this side room off the throne room. The Emperor says, you all, I don't know if it's the gods or destiny or perhaps more likely just absolute dumb luck, but you all have been chosen by something to help me ascend. That's right. I will become a god. It's not a want to. It's not a goal that I have. It will happen. It's just a matter of how and when. I will admit I thought it would be people of higher stature. People of greater beginnings. I surround myself with the greatest minds of all of Sankarel, but no, it's supposed to be you. My mother's final prophecy spoke of an inventor as tall and physical means as he was in conviction. A creation capable of creating. A silvered commander who took the advice of his subordinates. A woman who could bend her body to her will even if her mind was bound in reluctance. I have been searching our ranks for years for these people. People I imagined who would match my mother's description, and then I read General Trudy's reports and I just knew, so stand at ease, because you all are my new best friends. And so the Emperor explains to the party that he will ascend to a god. He just will. That's his mother's, the Oracle's, vision, and she's never been wrong before. So, the only problem is that in order to ascend, he has to find his soulmate. And according to her, his soulmate is both of orcish blood, which is bad for the Empire, and a man, which the Emperor finds personally unfortunate. So, those things in mind, they also believe that he's Macadian, which is also disgusting to the Empire because both he's orcish and they see him on mountains in the snow, which he could be somewhere in like other continents like Lahuya, but they think he's more Macadia because there's just more people of orcish blood there. They see a young man, probably 18 or so, and gaunt, as though he's starving and malnourished, which isn't surprising because he's somewhere in the lawless wastes of Macadia. But to see a blonde man with inhumanly large canine teeth and yellow eyes, so he's not half-orc, but he's like less than half. But the Emperor is sure that his kind of pure human genes will overpower the kind of orcishness, and he figures, well, if he's Macadian scum and a degenerate half-orc, opposites attract. That just means I'm more pure and worthy. He tells them that this mission must be kept secret at all costs, that Sankarel enemies lie even within Sankarel, and in Macadia everyone's their enemies. And so, the Emperor wants, in his mother's vision, she saw both the person who is to be the Emperor's soulmate, and she saw the party members each with the soulmate at some point. So the Emperor wants the party to go to Macadia in order to find him and fulfill that part of the prophecy, so they can figure out who his soulmate is. And they figure, well, it's even more convenient, which we already are looking for a mech, which we believe to be in Macadia, so we'll just send you under the guise of looking for the mech, but then you pretend to defect from Sankarel, and therefore get free range in Macadia, so you can go on and look for my soulmate. That's kind of all that happened before the first episode of Campaign 3. Brought with them a mech operator who they'd met previously during the White mission, named Sergeant Castaneda. Sergeant Castaneda was in charge of some penal soldiers or so, but he's very charismatic. He just likes doing his job. I have another kind of quote from the Emperor: "We'll be sending a mech operator with you, who will not know that you're planning to defect. So even if you fall short on the delivery, it'll be really convincing when you betray them. I mean, I hate to waste a good soldier. Good help's hard to come by, but this is more important. He will have a teleportation device, so if the opportunity to get the mech back comes up, go ahead and take it. But if you have to kill him to fit the lie, that is within the acceptable range of collateral damage. They're one of our most loyal, or at least that's what I've been told. You never know what people will actually do when the opportunity presents itself, so hey, maybe he'll come along with you. I mean, you cannot tell him about the soulmate thing, because while they are an upstanding soldier, the only people who know about this is us, Mother, Halea, and Ryan, and I'd like to keep it that way. Honestly, I'd rather Ryan didn't even know, but it's too late for that. So, if he defects with you, then you'll have to lose him before you begin your real quest. The Emperor also tells them that when they find his soulmate, don't just kidnap him. They leave kind of a dead drop address to write to the Emperor to tell them that they found them, because if you're in Macadia, you go to the post office and you're like, hey, this letter's for Emperor Fortinbras and Sankarel. They're gonna ask some questions. So they have a dead drop in Macadia that all these spies kind of go through to get back to command. And Chancellor Halea also gives kind of a little speech. Genevieve has never been wrong, but sometimes her visions don't turn out the way we might think. Claudius will ascend. You all will be with his soulmate at some point. You will be there when he ascends, but Claudius thinks that you will march into Macadia, love and duty bound to him and the Empire, stumble upon his soulmate, bring him back here, and he'll be a god next week. But I know that things are rarely so easy. You'll be tempted in Macadia. And before I go on a long tangent about all the truths you already know, I'll let you know one more. You cannot hide from me. There is no rock, no tree, no mountain you can crawl under. You could go to another plane of existence to run from the Empire, but you cannot run from me. Perhaps Claudius is right. Perhaps you will go along with this easily. But if he is not, if you so much as think of crossing the Empire, if you so much as accidentally fuck up the plan, I will find you. Genevieve's vision will come true one way or the other. Why not just make it easy on yourself and just do it our way? Okay? And the party goes to, they follow this teleportation circle, and they go to this place in the Underdark, which basically just a fish in a barrel kind of a setting, where they find the Vivianites. Vivian is actually based on, so the first RPG game I ever played was called Starfinder, and in this Starfinder game, we're heroes of the galaxy, but the captain of our ship was named Vivian, and she was a prostitute, basically. So then when Hip, who played Vivian, came to my game, playing my first campaign, playing somebody named Serial. Serial worshipped a god named Vivian, who was the goddess of passion. And so I made Vivian a god in my world, a up-and-coming god, but still a god. And so the Vivianites are followers of Vivian, and so they're very into, righteous rebellion and passion and going against social norms, and so they're basically just randy, horny spies, is what we kind of discussed in, because after the first campaign, I let them, so the campaign 2 and 3 take place 13 years after campaign 1. In campaign 1, they banished Vecna and did a couple other things, but, so I let the players go through, what would your characters do in the next 13 years, and so Serial said, I'm going to continue to worship Vivian and make the Vivianites into a spy kind of prepper organization. So that's what Vivianites are in this game. The other characters have some stuff, but they haven't really come up in the plot of the show yet, so I think I'll come to them when I get to them. But so, the Vivianites work with the Ilmatari, because the... oh, God. I've had like 6 beers at this point, so if I start to slur my words, I'm extremely sorry. Yeah, they get to the, it's called the Vag, the, Vivianite Alliance for Garfield Extraction. The Vivianites didn't know that Garfield is Garfield's real name. They thought it was just a code name, he said, but no, it's his real name. The Vivianites are randy, horny spies, and they're working with the Ilmatari. The Ilmatari also work with, because Ilmater's the god of kind of suffering and endurance. He's the patron saint of, like, prisoners and slaves and things. So it's kind of required that all Ilmatari have, like, PTSD. And so, Soon is the goddess of beauty. And so recently, because of some other kind of NPCs from the novel I wrote, creating this world before even campaign 1 in the first place, because of some of those NPCs, Soon has adopted more of a inner beauty as well, kind of a thing. So they've built several, the Ilmatari and the Soon together have made some kind of mental hospitals and things. And so there's always a Soon temple next to an Ilmatari temple, because the Soonites, take the Ilmatari to therapy, and then the Ilmatari, who are like battle-hardened, like guard the Soon temples, and so they kind of work together. And because of this, they've also started to kind of work on the Vivianites, because the Vivianites have like kind of a righteous rebellion thing going on, and the Ilmatari already have some kind of anti-slavery initiatives going, and so they kind of help each other out with that. And so they meet the players when they first get to this Vivianite fish in a barrel place. They are met with two NPCs. Or first of all, the party's like, hey, we're defecting. Don't want to fight you guys. And then Sergeant Castaneda, who has no idea of the plan, like freaks out, and so the party kind of just knocks his ass out and then deal with him later. But there's an NPC named Carter Mulligan, who's a kind of gray-black dragonborn, which again, chromatic dragonborn and not allowed in Sankarel, so it's the first chromatic dragonborn the party's ever seen. He's like, yeah, I'm here on loan. The Vivianites, the Soonites, they're pretty, but shitty at fighting. Good at seduction, espionage, I guess, but the Ilmatari work for them sometimes for stuff like this. And Ilmatari have several anti-slavery initiatives in here often, but I guess all this means is we're gonna start on Sankarel, but I mean, it's gonna take some time, unfortunately, but it's a start, I guess. And he's kind of the leader of the Ilmatari in the Vag, and Raya Wheatlow is the leader of the Vivianites in this area. And she dresses like every fantasy game from the early 2000s, where like the chick is wearing like a G-string and a bandana covering her tits, and that's supposed to be like heavy level armor. But that chick dresses like that on purpose because she wants to. So that's kind of the person. And she's got a Southern Belle accent like this. Well, we were expecting just to have to deal with two, but I guess we can assimilate another couple to the same plan, just different people. That kind of a voice. And so once it's all kind of well and good, because the Emperor had given them kind of whatever the party asked for, as long as it wouldn't have been suspicious for a common soldier to have, he gave them like whatever equipment they wanted, including I think it's rings of mind shielding. So the Soonites, the Vivianites and Ilmatari do Zone of Truth on them and interrogate them, but because of the rings, they're able to lie about their real intentions in Macadia. And so once it's all kind of well and good, that's when we are introduced to Kat, who is Charlotte's Campaign 3 character, and they are taken to this place. I forgot what I named it. It was like the Interceptor, I think, which is basically all magical kind of communication is recorded in Sankarel. So that's what Garfield's sister Lucretia invented. Garfield invented the halos for mechs, made mechs work, and then Lucretia invented the Interceptor, which, any message spell, any sending spell, any telepathy, any of that, it's all intercepted. Any Stone of Far Speech communication, if it's in the borders of Sankarel, it's intercepted and recorded. Now, the volume is so large that only a certain amount of, it's still very rare that something is actually important is intercepted. It's like the NSA, basically. But then the Vivianites have a kind of stream where, Sankarel gets probably 80% of all magical communication in Sankarel, and then the Vivianites are able to stream off about 25% of that 80%. So they're doing their espionage thing. With the Interceptor, that's another big part of what the Vag does. And so they get this big kind of tour from Kat, which is Charlotte's character, and during this they're taken to, barracks, the Chow Hall, whatever, and they're also passed by this room with two tanks in it, and these tanks are basically the party recognizes that Garfield and Lucretia are in these green tanks. It's the clone spell. I believe it's 7th level or something. But, Kat and the other Vivianites in Ilmatari will not tell them what this means. But several days later, after they've gone through this assimilation program, which is basically death by PowerPoint, kind of explaining Macadia enough for them to be able to blend in and pretend like they're not from Sankarel, so they can, not be executed by Sankarelian assassins or something. But,
Hi. I've gotten a new microphone since I recorded this. I recorded most of this about 3 months ago, back when we were writing, episode 5. I've wanted to do this since, episode 1, but then I recorded previously around the time of episode 5, and so now I've gotten a new microphone and I'm finishing, so be prepared for better quality for the rest of this, the longest episode on the planet Earth. They eventually learn about that Garfield is here, but didn't really say anything. Fel meets back up with Castaneda and tells him that they were that Castaneda is taking the fall for them, and Castaneda tells Fel that if he ever gets back to Sankarel, if Fel ever goes back, that to please tell his daughters that he loved him. Castaneda wants Fel, if Fel ever goes back to Sankarel, to tell his daughters that he loved them. Castaneda is going to stay with the Vivianites even after they let the rest of the crew go, because Castaneda is not pretending. He is not going to be with these Macadian savages. He wants to go back to Sankarel, because when they gave him the teleportation stone, the Emperor told him, come back with the mech suit or die upon your return. So even when he gets free of the Vivianites, after he convinces them, he's gonna lie and be like, yeah, I'll defect also, I guess, eventually, and he's going to try to still get the mech suit back, is his current plan. But so the other members of the squad, they're like, well, what are we going to do to make a living now in this free capitalist world? And so they're like, well, you guys have a specific skill set. You could become adventurers for real. And it is this moment where they pass by the tanks with Garfield and Lucretia in them, and there's another cutscene. Surprise, surprise. This was all written by me, so of course there was. They see Garfield's clone banging on the side of the tank, and so they bust Garfield out, and he slides to the floor in a puddle of slime, and while hyperventilating, he looks up to the tank with Lucretia in it, and he waits for a second, then he hugs the tank and starts sobbing, and the other Vivianites are like, sir, what's your name? Garfield! Is she... And the other person asks, is she... Do you know her? Wasn't she supposed to come at the same time? And Garfield, continuing to sob and pant in just misery and angst, says, Lucretia's my twin. We're twins, and I know we're both goofy and animated, but we're 420 years old. I haven't gone 24 hours without seeing her in 420 years. They took everything. She's a part of me. She's my fucking soulmate. And when our parents got taken away, we stuck together. We learned magic together. We got re-educated together. And he closes his eyes and fists so tight he starts shaking. No! It's not education. It wasn't education. Education means learning and truth and discovery and power. It wasn't education. They tortured us. They tortured us for years. They took turns torturing us, and they made the other one watch, and then they took the scars away when it was over so we couldn't even prove that it happened. And then they fucking made us into death machines. They made us experiment on people, on kids. They made us kill people. I figured out how to make mechs work and they threw me away. In the garbage, they put me through all of that, and when I changed the game, I made the biggest magical combat advancement since fucking Fireball, and they took it from me and they didn't even thank me. I made Sankarel's army the most powerful military force in history, and they didn't even thank me. It's bullshit. It's all bullshit. The propaganda, the lies, the sheer fucking number of murders. How many people does the Empire fucking kill a day? Who fucking cares? Because it's for the fucking good of society. How good is your fucking society if everyone's dead, huh? Fuck the Empire. And it's like the first time he's ever said that, and it like clicks with him, and he repeats it over and over, louder and louder, until he's about to pass out. Fuck the Empire. Fuck the Empire. She tried to stop me so we'd stay together, but I can't fucking do it anymore. Even if she just lied to us and I just killed myself for real, I can't fucking live like this anymore. I can't. She's everything to me, but I can't live like this anymore, Lucretia. For another fucking second. And I'm never gonna see her again. Well, it's over, Mr. Garfield. You're safe now, okay? It's over. You're gonna start a new life. We could contact her, so you could tell her you made it. No! And he stands up on shaking new clone legs and grabs him by the lapels and almost drags them down because he doesn't have any muscle. He says, do not fucking try and contact her. Do you understand me? That's the whole reason I had to leap of faith this bullshit in the first place. Do you fucking understand me? Don't even fucking scry on her. If they find out and take her before she can escape, they'll never let her go. They won't even kill her. If they know about the clones, we're elves, we live forever. They'll torture her forever. Do you fucking understand me? Forever. And he falls to the floor again, still naked and covered in green slime in a room full of strangers. And then he finally notices the party, and he looks at their shoes as they're standing in the hallway, and his eyes pan up. And he was so confused, he actually stops crying for a second, not looking away from them, but he asks one of the Vivianites, do you guys have a doctor? Because I'm hallucinating. And they kind of go through the meeting again and they explain with the lies, that we were after the mech, that we defected as soon as we got out, and Garfield kind of accepts that answer, and they ask, how did you know you could trust him? Like, how did Garfield know that the Vivianites were trustworthy enough to literally, and Garfield points to a slice of avocado toast, and he says, that right there. And, I'm sorry to say, Fel, I did have that gun I was supposed to give you last time we saw each other, that he got in the magical gashapon, but I needed it to kill myself, so I'm sorry I couldn't give it to you. I told them you were supposed to have it in my suicide note, but seeing as you're here with me, I don't think they're gonna get it to you, but I mean, if you get me the gun, I could easily do the +2 enchantment for you. And, Garfield, I had a couple other things that I wanted him to say during the thing to kind of show his, character. It says, I scripted a thing where Carter Mulligan, the Ilmatari Dragonborn Paladin, is like stern with Garfield when he gets a little too eccentric, because they have them go through the assimilation program again with Garfield to make him feel like more comfortable. But he, in explaining something to Garfield, he gets a little too stern. And Garfield says, I'm feeling a little fragile at the moment. I'd appreciate it if he turned the intensity down a notch, okay? And Carter Mulligan's like, oh, I'm too intense for you, you fucking pansy. And Garfield's like, I blindly trusted a group of people I'd never met so much that I shot myself in the fucking head 3 days ago to escape glorified slavery to a genocidal totalitarian regime, leaving my friends and family and everything I'd ever known behind to start a new life in a place that was always told was only populated by cannibals, monsters, and lawless psychopaths. If I could get a frappuccino, I think I'd be fine. But until then, can you just, say stuff in a nicer tone, please? And most people are worried about that. And, Garfield also refuses to make, like, a false identity. Like, they make everyone else have, like, witness protection identities so they can lie to people when they're hunting for... Because I thought it would take them a lot longer to find King Henry. So, I guess that's how the cookie crumbles. But I anticipated them being kind of on the lam a little longer, if that's the right word. But they asked Garfield, like, aren't you worried about them finding you? You need to change your identity. And Garfield says, I'm terrified to me what happened to my sister. I think about it every second of the day, but she had her chance to come and she said no. She would rather live in Sankarel than be dead, but I would rather die. I could spend another 1,000 years. I could live 2,000. What's the fucking point if I have to hide who I am? If they hear about me, would they send assassins? Maybe. But I say... And he clenches his fist and sparks of magic fly off him. I say let him come. And he kind of goes on about his sister a little more. And Garfield wears extremely, extremely wacky clothes. Fourth wall breaking wacky clothes. He says, I wear ugly clothes because I know my body is so beautiful that I'm able to pull it off and turn it into art. But you aren't like me at all, so I'm confused as to why you wear ugly clothes. I don't know if y'all care about me reading this, but I don't know, I wrote it and I'm proud of it, so I'm going to continue just reading these little tiny snips of things that I wanted him to say. I don't think I have him anymore. But, they're in a bar talking about how McCady is going to go. And Garfield's like, gets a drink and he says, excuse me, sir, do you have little drinks with the umbrellas? And it continues, I remember when the Fortinbras family took power. I was only 120 years old then, but out of magic school, we had so much hope. They were going to make things better, fix everything. Once we realized it was a lie, it was far too late. I was just good enough to be worth keeping around, but not to be a threat. I'm one of the oldest people in Sankarel. Everyone else got murdered, but not Garfield. Not Garfield. He's so eccentric. Just look at the clothes that Breek wears. Listen to the dumb way he talks, because it used to be the regional accent, and he never lost it. Not ever. He's a deviant, sure, but he's old enough to remember a kinder government where we re-educated him, so it'll be fine. He's been loyal to us for 300 years, we might as well let him live another half-dozen. And how could someone who dresses that stupid ever be dangerous anyway? And Garfield cries into his umbrella drink. I think I covered everything else. I think. Yeah, but so after that, I think the first episode, let me check, just to make fucking sure. Yeah, I think that's everything. If, you're listening to this, if you care enough to listen to this, 2 hours and 30 minutes of me, ranting, if you have any questions or comments or want clarification, or if you want stats on any of my homebrew shit, just message me on Twitter. Yeah, I can't wait to see what the future's in store. If you listen to this, thank you for listening to me ramble for 2 hours and 30 minutes. If you want to read my novels about James and Stephen, and I'm writing another one about a character we haven't really seen on the show yet, probably won't till, campaign 4 or 5, or no, 5 or 6. We've already got a campaign. There's a campaign 4 that I don't record, because it's, I'm not going to say anything else. If I keep talking, I'll die. But thank you for listening to this. If you listened. You're my favorite person. And just know that I love you. Good night and goodbye. Who says that? Who cares? I did. Bye! Hey, it's Bailey Ford, your Dungeon Master. Thank you for listening to another episode of Cowboys and Illithids. I would like to thank our regular players, Charlotte, John, Matt, Hip, and John. Hip also drew our cover art, and the background music is from tabletopaudio.com. Please share the show if you liked it, and feel free to post questions or comments to us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at CIllithids, and on Tumblr with the Cowboys and Illithids or CAI podcast hashtag. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in a few days.